Welcome to CTV's Capital Dispatch with Rachel Aiello.
Hey, so this week, two big things happened on the Hill I want to start us off with. First, the entire House of Commons and political discourse in this country this week was seized on this barn burner report from the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. You might see this acronym flying around, NSICOP. And so just to kind of walk us back a step to figure out how we got here, before we get into what this report said, you'll remember back when the Prime Minister was trying to triage these accusations of foreign interference in the 2019-2021 elections, around all that fury over him calling a public inquiry or hiring David Johnston, he tasked two oversight committees with looking into the issue. So one of them was the National Security Intelligence Review Agency. They looked at things and reported back not too long ago. And then there was this committee of parliamentarians. It's this top secret committee of MPs and senators. He asked them to also look into the matter. And that is what brought this report forward this week. So in this report, there is a series of really eyebrow-raising accusations that has kind of set Parliament Hill ablaze. Specifically, in this report, heavily redacted still, there are accusations that current and former members of Parliament and senators may be complicit, willingly or unwittingly, in assisting foreign states in their efforts to meddle in this country. This is quite a shocking revelation. Among some of the accusations that are in there is either directly or indirectly trying to assist. One MP allegedly kept up a relationship with a foreign intelligence officer. So once this report was made public and this new series of accusations, we had been talking about for months, if not over a year now, about these accusations, certainly over a year now, of meddling in the election. We had that initial inquiry report. And this kind of new layer of once they have been elected, these MPs allegedly are still connecting with foreign states such as China and India, really raised a lot of questions, some suggesting that these individuals should be named. And that is really where we had the heat on this week. We had the Conservatives come out calling for the government to name these people, a lot of pushes to make it clear, suggesting that MPs were not comfortable sitting in the House of Commons next to someone who may be essentially committing traitorous activities. So quite a high rhetoric around this week. Reporters tried to ask the chair of this committee if he could disclose more in terms of trying to name names and figure out who these individuals may be. He pointed to the RCMP. We heard from the RCMP this week. They said, while they are aware of this, they will not confirm if they are investigating any members of Parliament. Perhaps not a surprising thing, but certainly not leaving much open there in terms of getting further answers. The push continued. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said he was going to get a classified briefing to try to get more into this. And then on Thursday morning at committee, Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc was asked again if he is willing to name names and make this clear, because there's a good amount of this report, highly redacted national security information, that is kind of left blacked out. So most parliamentarians and Canadians reading it are kind of left to wonder. And he essentially said, I want to get it right, so I'm just going to read from it what his response was. Essentially, Canadians need to understand, he said, that these names are contained in intelligence reports. In some case, they are uncorroborated or unverified. Going on to essentially say, trying to elicit some sort of big name at this point would be irresponsible. So we're going to obviously keep following this file, but kind of as where we are right now is the push continues to try to figure out who these MPs are or were, whether this accusation of them trying to help a foreign state is legitimate and backed up by evidence or just intelligence, and whether any of these alleged meddling had any direct impact on things like government policy. So certainly kind of a new line of inquiry down this ongoing coverage of the alleged foreign interference in this country. It really did kind of take on new life this week. The other hot topic that did take on new life this week as well, it's kind of continuation of something I flagged in our last video, and that is over this error in the Parliamentary Budget Officer's analysis of the carbon tax. So this week, the heat was back on the Liberals because the PBO East Giroux went to committee and said that essentially he has a version of analysis he's seen from the government that he has been asked not to disclose. And so this started a whole fury of Conservatives suggesting that there was some sort of like secret analysis that the Liberal government had showing that their carbon tax did hinder Canadians in their pocketbooks, and they were keeping it secret, calling on them to release this. The Liberals essentially saying no such report exists. So again, it's just this continuing fight over the varying views on what the PBO has put out in terms of whether the carbon tax costs Canadians more. The Liberals not happy with the PBO, certainly, but Freeland this week said she chalked it all up to an honest mistake. Anyways, if you're curious about that one, you should check out a couple articles on ctvnews.ca/politics to kind of get the nuance, but just the latest kind of continuation of this fight over the carbon tax this week, kind of amplified by this analysis and these new comments from the PBO suggesting he knows more than the government's letting him say.
In 2016, when I was the first Prime Minister to walk in Pride parades across the country, in Montreal at home particularly, everyone was filled with the question of, is it even relevant anymore? Do we even need to be marching in Pride parades anymore because we've made so much progress? We're there, aren't we? And my answer at that time was, we've made tremendous progress. There's always still more to do, but you know, as I get out across the country this summer, nobody's going to ask me that question, whether it's still relevant to be marching in Pride parades, whether it's still important to be standing up as allies, whether it's still meaningful that Pride is, yes, a wonderful celebration, but also a protest. Unfortunately, it is.
So that is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau speaking at the flag raising event on the Hill this week, raising the Pride flag to mark June Pride Month. And I picked this as my quote of the week for two reasons. One, I think it's notable what the Prime Minister is saying here about how perhaps in years past, when he first started marching in Pride, individuals were wondering, like, why do you still need to do this? Have we not reached progress? And then noting that given the state of attacks and hate that the LGBTQ2S community is facing, that is very much still relevant for the Prime Minister to signal his support and march in this event. Just noting that that event happened is partly why I picked this. But secondly, in the bigger context of why this was my quote of the week, was because it came amid questions to the Conservatives about their stance on the issue. So Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was not at the flag raising. His deputy, Melissa Lantsman, was, as well as Conservative MP Eric Duncan. But this is all coming because another Conservative MP went on a podcast last week and said that if he could, he would vote down gay marriage. So this prompted a series of questions to the Conservatives. The Liberals accused this MP, Arnold Viersen, of essentially saying the quiet part out loud. This is part of their ongoing push to really wedge the Conservatives on social issues. Abortion is another one you've heard me talk about before. And then what we got was quite remarkable this week was this very clear statement from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, not his spokesperson, attributable to Poilievre, saying that same-sex marriage in this country is legal and will remain legal if he becomes Prime Minister. He went on to say that he disagreed with Arnold Viersen over what he said on this podcast, specifically his comments about marijuana legalization, that would stay under Poilievre, about abortion, how he would not try to relitigate on that matter, and then clearly stating that he is not trying to go after same-sex marriage rights. So I thought that was quite interesting because it was the most concrete and direct Poilievre has been, I think. And the fact that this had to come up was also a bit of an interesting dynamic on the Hill this week. We've heard that some Conservative MPs were not too happy with their colleague Arnold Viersen for going on a podcast and saying this, kind of continuing to put fuel on the fire of the Liberals' arguments about the quiet efforts from the Conservative Party and their social conservative wing to try to roll back rights. So I just thought it was an interesting timing of things. We had this flag raising. Poilievre wasn't there. He's, I would say, to be brief, mixed record when it comes to speaking about LGBTQ2S+ issues, to then come out this week and at least clearly say he disagrees with this MP. We know there's some caucus fracas. But don't worry, same-sex marriage would be upheld under his government. So just wanted to note that. As for what I'm watching next week, bills. So there is only 2 weeks left of the House sitting in their scheduled calendar before they go on a more than 2-month break. And that means the pressure is really on the government to try to start passing legislation. So they've made some progress over the last few weeks on some priority bills, but they still have a number that have yet to make it fully across the finish line. Among those are 2 big financial bills, the Fall Economic Update implementation legislation. Yes, it is still before Parliament. Fall was a long time ago. And then the budget bill is also still making its way through. And I keep checking every day the notice paper. When is she going to table this? Freeland has yet to give notice that she is going to be presenting that capital gains legislation. So that is also something I don't think is looking likely to pass before they rise. But certainly she's going to try to get that before the House. There's a few other foreign interference bills that I'm curious to watch now, how they go because of this ongoing conversation and this new light that's kind of been given, this new attention because of this NSI COP report, whether those are going to be fast-tracked or whether MPs are going to say, whoa, 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 we need to kind of like take a step back and really go line by line through these pieces of legislation to make sure that they're doing everything we need them to right now. So basically just watch for there to be an increased pressure on the government in the House to move its legislative agenda, making any sort of procedural shenanigans enacted by an opposition party that much more impactful. We're really into that crunch time. So it's just going to be key to watch how the government handles its legislative agenda, how it's getting bills passed, and which priorities are going to have to become the ones they really push, and what other bills that they wanted to see passed kind of fall to the wayside or put on the back burner until they return in the fall.